ready, Midnight Strikers, because today we're going to be crossing a couple names off the Disturbed discography, starting with 2010's Asylum, right here. And this is a review that I meant to record on Friday, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, had to reschedule for today. It is Sunday. To make up for it, I am going to be recording this, and then recording my review of their next album, well, their next B-side album, right before their hiatus, known as The Lost Children, which was dropped in 2011, less than a year later, actually about a year later. But back to Asylum. This is their longest studio album to date, if you're counting the deluxe edition, which actually has 17 tracks on it, and all of which are just epic. This is probably the Disturbed album with the most variety and variation in the song structures, as well as just in the tracks themselves. I mean, you got your heavy tracks, you got a lot of guitar solos, you got your really soft tracks, you got your intense tracks. I mean, you got pretty much everything from all across the board, and it ends up sounding fresh. It doesn't sound like anything that Disturbed has ever done before, with the exception of maybe a couple songs on here, say Asylum, the title track. Another Way to Die sounds pretty familiar, but those were the singles. So to get into a little bit of background story and background information, Disturbed was pretty much the band of my high school years, and this was contributed to the fact that I was just getting into metal. I was, just coming off of an 80s, kind of classic rock binge, and this was really one of the first bands that drew me in. I mean, I was already listening to bands like Metallica, and actually, I think Metallica was like the only metal band I actually liked. So when I heard this, The Sickness and Believe and Liberate, my mind was blown. I had to get more of it. And this was around the time when, this was actually around like late 2007, early 2008, and Indestructible was just coming out. That was my favorite album of all time for a really long time. And then finally, after one of the best summers of my life, it was the summer between my junior year and the summer and my senior year. And it was a very wild summer of basically nothing but hanging out with friends every day and riding around in my car, blasting music. I was the only one with my license at the time, so I basically was the chauffeur, unfortunately. But back to the music at hand. When this first came out, the first single was a bit underwhelming, in my opinion. Another Way to Die hit the shelves in, I think, July or something like that. If I remember correctly, it was about a month before the release of this album. And I thought it was kind of preachy. I love the guitars. I loved the vocals sound, and I just love the sound overall. But the message in the song was talking about pollution and how we should basically, drive hybrid cars and pick up after ourselves. And the whole thing just seemed a little bit preachy. Too preachy for me. Now, I have listened to the song since then, and I don't really feel that way anymore. It's just it's a weird kind of subject to hear a metal band talking about. But then again, that's one of the best things about this album, so that plays to its strengths, is the variation in topic matter for the lyrics. Now, you got everything from losing your child on this album, like losing your baby before it was born, miscarriages, to pretty much everything. Being in an locked up in an asylum, poisoned by a relationship issue, and there's just a bunch of stuff on here that you've really never seen before lyrically on a Disturbed album. And let me tell you, the guitar solos in this are epic. There's a guitar solo in almost every track, and it's not exactly in a formulaic way either. I mean, Remnants itself is just one big instrumental. And let me tell you, I still haven't found what I'm looking for, which is actually known on this as Ilshfuilf for some reason. They just abbreviate the letters. It's probably the best version of the song. I mean, I listened to the U2 version. It's a U2 cover, and I gotta say, it sounds a little too popish. This is my favorite version of I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. David Draymond just absolutely fucking kills it. It is amazing. And my favorite song on this has probably got to be the title track combined with Remnants. This is a 6 to 7 minute long epic. and Remnants only makes it better by setting the mood with the guitars. And everything in the structure of this song was just absolutely perfect. When this was released as a single, I just couldn't get enough of it. I was like, okay, this is the Disturbed we need right here. You know, screw that Another Way to Die bullshit, because this right here is Disturbed. So like I said, it has since grown on me. Another Way to Die has, but when I first heard it, I wasn't really the biggest fan. Now, the weakest link on this album probably actually is Another Way to Die. And I don't know why they released it as a single, or it could be The Infection. But The Infection actually does have a nice rhythm to it. It sounds different from all the stuff Disturbed had done in the past, but it still sounds very familiar. So it's got that fresh yet familiar vibe to it. The solo is very good, and it just kind of has it's fun to listen to. It's very fun to listen to. Crucified is another one that I wanted to really talk about, because Crucified and Serpentine kind of have that really dark yet soft appeal to them, that it's talking about really dark subject matter, especially with Crucified. It sounds very melodic, very harmonic as well, and it just has that dark undertone to it that makes you want to listen to it over and over again. And like I said with Variation, you can't get enough of this album. It even has two live versions of one live version of Down with the Sickness and Stricken, and they're really fucking good. I mean, this is Disturbed in 2010, 10 years after the Sickness was released, and they're still killing it live. It's just mind blowing, especially with Stricken as well, which this album actually came out 5 years after Stricken was released, and that album is awesome too. Or that, 10,000 Fists is awesome, but Stricken is awesome too, live here. Another cover they actually did for this album, actually they did it in 2008 during the Indestructible sessions, was Livin' After Midnight by Judas Priest. Now, when this album was released, for some reason, whatever it was, I did not like Judas Priest. I couldn't stand Electric Eye. I tried listening to, Screaming for Vengeance. The only song that really caught my attention was You Got Another Thing Coming, and I didn't want to look into anything else. I knew they had Livin' After Midnight, wasn't really a big fan of the original, so when this album came out, I was like, oh, we'll see how this goes. David and Dan and John and everyone, Mike, absolutely killed on this track. It was perfect. I mean, the vocal deliverance, the sound of the guitars, the production is very much so in your face, and it doesn't sound like they're trying to replicate it, such as on their newest album, I Know I'm Going There, but The Sound of Silence sounds exactly like the Simon and Garfunkel cover, or original version. So, Livin' After Midnight sounds like they're trying to take the cover and twist it and tweak it and add that Disturbed touch to it and make it their own. Now, one odd thing about this album is the fact that before you separate the tracks, if you actually do separate the tracks, I still haven't found what I'm looking for, and the last track on the album for the standard edition, Innocence, are together. They're on the same track, and there's about a minute and a half of silence before you get to the actual cover. Yeah, that didn't sit well with me. I don't know why they did that. I mean, I don't really like fast forwarding through a track just to hear another track, so I separated them with the power of Audacity, basically. And once you do that, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Is still 3 minutes and 49 seconds. I mean, it's not like you're cutting any length off the track, you're just separating them, and it's easier to listen to that way. But without the power of Audacity or some Pro Tools or music editing, you can't separate these tracks, which is kind of a disappointment, and it's a little annoying having to fast forward through Innocence if you want to listen to I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, but I guess it is what it is. I did separate the tracks, so it's a little bit easier to listen to that way, but it is what it is. Overall, I'd probably say this album deserves a solid 9.8 out of 10. Every song almost has a ripping guitar solo. There's so much variation with the structures. I like it a little bit better than Indestructible. The only thing that I have to say about this album that is negative would probably be that it isn't as in your face as Indestructible was. I mean, Perfect Insanity is one of my favorite, absolute favorite songs. But they didn't have any real headbanger moments on this album, with the exception of Asylum and maybe My Child. No, they had Living After Midnight. That was a pretty headbanging song, but they didn't really have any in-your-face, balls to the wall metal moments on this album, other than the aforementioned. So that's really the only downside, but it's still an amazing listen. It has so much variety in it, and it's just a really, really good album overall. Probably still my top favorite Disturbed album of all time. So, with that, 9.8 out of 10. This is Midnight Strike 3625. Thank you for watching. Keep calm and rock on.